We like to acknowledge that we are all calling in from land that was occupied before European colonization. I am in central Massachusetts, which was once part of Nipmuc Nation. NOFA Mass aims to make our racial equity statement a living document that drives our work to heal the harm that racism has caused in the food system. And we urge participants to act as allies to our BIPOC communities. You can do that in a number of ways: provide resources to BIPOC organizations that are working to feed their communities, be a partner and stand against white supremacist behavior and actions, work to dismantle racism within the food and agricultural systems. And together, we can work together to dismantle racism in the food system. The Commonwealth can truly feed and serve the commonality for all of us. If you're not sure what land you're currently living on, you can check this interactive map out, native-land.ca, and we'll put that in the chat. You can investigate that on your own time and see perhaps where your land and who your land belonged to at one point. We have a number of sponsors that help to support our work and make this conference happen. So you can find a click through for these folks in our program book and also on our website. So if you are looking to purchase any goods or services, it would be great if you could go through one of these sponsors and let them know that you support and appreciate their support of NOFA Mass. We have Emily Landeck and Steve Munoz. Emily is the owner of Riverland Farm, a certified organic 40-acre vegetable farm selling primarily wholesale and providing a local winter share. She's also a founding member of Sunderland Farm Collaborative, an online shopping platform founded at the beginning of the pandemic. Steve is the farm manager at Massaro Community Farm in Woodbridge, Connecticut, a nonprofit certified organic farm which operates a CSA, sells to local markets, offers on-farm educational programs and events, and donates at least 10% of its annual harvest to hunger relief organizations. Steve was a co-founding member of the New Connecticut Farmer Alliance and currently serves as the board president for Connecticut NOFA. And we'll put a link to his website in the chat so you can check out all that he's doing. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to Steve and Emily.
All right. I am Emily Landeck. I am the owner of Riverland Farm. We are in Sunderland, Massachusetts, which is just in the Pioneer Valley, so kind of at the foot of the Berkshires. We are a 40-acre certified organic mixed vegetable farm. We are women-run, and starting in 2017, we transitioned mostly to wholesale. We had done a CSA for many years before that. And a couple of years ago, we moved over towards wholesale primarily. We're also the primary grower for Farm Direct Co-op, which is a CSA that picks up twice a week on the farm from us for the 22-week growing season. And they're based out in Eastern Massachusetts and kind of the North Shore of Boston. We also provide, as Christy mentioned, an on-farm winter share for November through January. And we are also the primary grower for another winter share, November through January out in Eastern Massachusetts as well, shared harvest winter share. Farm Direct Co-op is anywhere upwards of around 800 members. Our on-farm share can range from 60 to 80, depending on the year. And shared harvest can kind of range from 150 to 250, depending on the year. As of 2020, we are a co-founder and member of the Sunderland Farm Collaborative, which I will talk about a little bit later this year. Something else that is of note is that this past year in 2020 was the first year of my ownership of this farm. I'd worked on this farm for many years, and in this past couple of years had worked through a transition with the former owners, Megan Arquin and Rob Lynch. And had taken over the operations of the farm and purchased all the equipment as of January 2020. So that led to a very interesting year, definitely. We grow, like I said, we grow a mixed range of vegetables. However, we do have some specifics that we really try and focus on throughout the year. We grow a pretty large amount of rainbow and orange carrots, both bunched and loose, and as well as beets. We grow a wide variety of beets, both bunched and loose throughout the year. Additionally, we try to do probably the 30-week growing season that we're participating in. We usually do about 25 weeks of radishes and bunched scallions. We've found that it's a really huge seller for the wholesale markets in particular. We also then kind of coming into the summer, the height of the summer, we put a lot of focus on watermelons and cantaloupe. We also are expanding our production of eggplants and peppers in varieties, as well as kind of acreage in the height of the summer. And then the fall, we grow a large quantity of sweet potatoes as well as Brussels sprouts. Obviously, this is all mixed in with a lot of other mixed vegetables, but these are kind of the main hitters for ourselves. And we've been expanding the brassicas, the cauliflower and broccoli in the fall in particular recently. For wholesale, we primarily sell to local co-ops, grocery stores, other farms, helping people bulk out their CSAs. Like I mentioned, we actually provide for a couple different CSAs throughout the year as their primary grower. And we also we sell to Whole Foods, primarily out east, but we also do sell to the Hadley Whole Foods, which is really close by for us. This year, we started a transition to Local Food Marketplace as our online platform for our wholesale orders. And that kind of coincided nicely with the Sunderland Farm Collaborative for us, as that's also hosted on Local Food Marketplace, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But that's been a really big shift for us around the streamlining of our wholesale orders. Whoops, I'm gonna go back one. So as I mentioned, this year was my first year of owning this farm, but it has been quite an interesting year, as I think we all experienced. We had the pandemic come in pretty early on. We had quite a range of weather, a very serious drought for a large portion of the summer. And meanwhile, with all of that, some of the highest demand we've experienced in the wholesale market in the past 5 years. It was kind of unbelievable. It was encouraging and amazing how much support and demand there was. And it was also a little overwhelming that we could sell out of almost everything all the time. So we definitely had an interesting year, and it definitely, I feel like we've taken a lot of lessons from this year. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we got together with some other local farms in our area and started to kind of talk about what we were seeing, which was the closing of local schools. We're nearby a lot of universities that are a big portion of business for our farms. Also restaurants were all kind of closing for indefinite amounts of time. And we were all a little uncertain as to what the market would look like. We did not know this demand would be so high. And so we, along with Kitchen Garden, Warner Farm, and Riverland, we all got together and decided to start the Sunderland Farm Collaborative. The Sunderland Farm Collaborative was designed as a way to create a home delivery option with contactless curbside delivery or pickup for our local community. So using Local Food Marketplace, we created a customizable box shopping site. To do this, the customers can log on and choose from a wide variety of things. We were the founding members, but we decided to bring in a lot of other producers from the area, both vegetable producers as well as local bakeries, flour, grain growers, dairy, milk, eggs, everything like that. And the whole goal was to try and make as much of a one-stop shop as possible for anyone who was going to be arriving on this site. We started with kind of the baseline of that one-stop shop. And then as you can see, we've added in meat, seafood, and other frozen items that are packed in a slightly different way. They've kind of, the pack line has figured out how to improve that. So we're able to offer a lot of wide variety of goods. We're in an extremely prolific area. And so it's really great to be able to offer so many awesome local regional products. We first launched this in April. We got it up and running pretty quick thanks to Caroline Pam at Kitchen Garden. She was extremely integral in the process of getting this up and running. And in the first 12 hours, we had no idea what the demand was going to look like. And in the first 12 hours, we ended up with over 200 orders, which was overwhelming. Again, like I said, for us in terms of, we were really appreciative of the support, and also it was surprising. So we kind of, we hit the ground running for sure. We were renting vans, we were borrowing vans for delivery routes, and we split it up into various delivery routes. And we did 2 delivery or pickup days. And so the way that the customers can log on and shop in their box, they can create their own box. As I mentioned, it's extremely customizable. And then when they're in this site, they can go in and choose the delivery or pickup location. And we chose a wide variety of pickup locations in addition to home delivery for the purpose of, consolidating some of the orders that were a little bit more on the outskirts of our delivery radius that we were operating in. So as of now, there are 8 different pickup locations that people can choose from. And then we have about a 20 to 30 mile radius that people are delivering, that the collaborative is delivering within. The pickups were designed, the pickup locations were chosen particularly in the beginning to be a collaborative between us and other businesses, trying to promote businesses that were still operating throughout the pandemic, particularly through the early parts of the pandemic, trying to drum up some business for those small businesses in our area that would maybe benefit from the traffic that would come from picking up these boxes. As I mentioned, we had a lot of orders right at first. And so then as we started to get bigger and bigger and expand delivery routes, we started to really consolidate the operations and decision-making from day to day to the Kitchen Garden Farm. They've taken on a large portion of this whole process. It is already a DBA under their business. For the ease of things, that was what we had decided to do. And so we've now transitioned a large portion of it to them. There's definitely still some consultation between all of us farms, but for the most part, Tim and Caroline are operating this business on the Kitchen Garden grounds. They've since hired a full staff. They have a full-time manager who are running this whole operation on its own, because as some people know, Kitchen Garden Farm is also a fully operating farm. So they have this business entity going on kind of on the side of everything else that they do on a daily basis. So how it works, like I mentioned, we have 2 days that are drop-off and pickup days. So very similar kind of layout, but for example, for the orders for Saturday, we have all of Monday as producers to update our availability on the website, and then the ordering opens on Tuesday morning. Orders are accepted for 48 hours about, so all of Tuesday and all of Wednesday. And then on Thursday morning, the program itself, Local Food Marketplace, has this all built in. The pick lists are sent to each of the individual producers. So as I mentioned, we have a wide variety of producers that are operating within this realm on this platform. And so having that automation from Local Food Marketplace is really helpful. So those pick lists are sent to producers on Thursday morning, and then the producers have a 24-hour window to drop those products at the Kitchen Garden aggregation site. The kitchen garden has at this point expanded with the growth of this operation. It's expanded some infrastructure on site, and they have a cooler that's completely dedicated to the collaborative. There's also a whole packing space that is pretty much dedicated to the collaborative at this point. And so it's really streamlined over there, the way that orders are dropped off and how many, the people that are, the way that we're participating with this. On Friday afternoon, the staff for the collaborative packs out the customized boxes, and then the deliveries go out on Saturday morning. I believe they're operating on 3 or 4 routes, home delivery routes right now. And then like I mentioned, there are 8 pickup locations throughout the Pioneer Valley right now, anywhere from, I believe, Greenfield all the way down to Holyoke, Springfield. And so some of them are deliveries to doorsteps, some of them are all, dropped off in kind of a larger amount at pickup locations. And those pickup locations operate from 12 to 5 on the pickup day. The orders for Wednesday are extremely similar. It's just kind of a different timeline. One thing that we did do pretty early on was we created a full day of when the orders end for one period and when the orders start for the next period. We created a full 24 hours for producers to be able to have the time to update their availability. As many of us know, as farmers in the height of the season in particular, that turnaround from one evening to the next morning is a pretty difficult thing to be tracking, as well as all the other things that we're doing. So we created a little bit of leadway for farmers and producers to be able to update that availability within 24 hours. Oops. So some specifics about the actual program and how we're operating. We do have an order minimum of $30 for any given box. That just basically was the calculation of what it would take to cover the general costs of operating. We also have an additional $10 charge for home delivery, and they've recently added a $5 pickup fee. Part of that is because the collaborative pays the pickup locations for those hours between 12 and 5 when a van or some sort of infrastructure is set up and they're actually, providing a space for the pickup of the boxes. As producers, we set our own retail prices for those products. So we get to decide what we want to sell them for, understanding that then the collaborative adds an additional 20% for the final customer price. So it really does. It is nice as a producer to get to kind of adjust that price for a little bit. If you have a lot of something, you really want to move it, you could drop that price down a little bit. But understanding that 20% does add to what the customer actually finally sees. The other thing that's really awesome that we really liked about Local Food Marketplace, both as a wholesale farm as well as within the collaborative, is that the producer availability is adjustable for the full ordering period. So you think you have 20 bunches of carrots, you put up those 20 bunches of carrots, you go out and you realize the next planting's ready, and you can go in and change and say, oh, actually we have 150 bunches of carrots actually available. And that can change all the way up to the time that the order period closes. We also have alerts set up so that producers get alerts if they sell out of an item, if they'd like to add something. They also get alerts for, if something isn't necessarily right. And then the other thing that's really been helpful about our kind of the built-in overlap between various vegetable farms in particular is that if one of us thinks that we have, say you think your fennel's in a good place, you go and you realize that it's just not quite there, but you've listed it on the site already and you have orders. Oftentimes we can kind of complement one another, help each other fill in spaces. And, sometimes that means, filling it in from another farm. And sometimes that means, finding us a additional amount of fennel because it just seems like so many people want fennel that week. The other convenient thing about that overlap between all of us producers is that sometimes it seems like it complements each other. We all don't have the exact same timing. And so maybe our kale is doing a lot better during this week than, Kitchen Garden's kale. And then the week after we can kind of switch. And so there is a good amount of communication between farmers and producers. And then, yeah, like I mentioned, the producers have a 24-hour drop-off window, which I think allows for, again, that kind of nice flexibility in the process for people. So something that I think that we've all felt through this year is that it's great. We really like it. We feel really good about what's working. People seem really happy with the products that they're getting. It's been a really interesting addition to the way that we operate, particularly at Riverland. For us at Riverland, it was an additional 10% of income. So we added income. It didn't necessarily feel like we were replacing anything. Partially because it felt like there were smaller numbers. You know, it wasn't this wholesale numbers that we were looking at, it was smaller numbers that we were operating with. It is a retail price. And so that's a really different way of operating in selling our vegetables than a wholesale price. It also was a kind of cool thing for us that it added an outlet for smaller amounts. So we got to play up in the top right corner of these pictures is the Fioretto, which is a sprouting cauliflower variety. Originally, I think was available at Johnny's. It's now available pretty widely, but it was this kind of thing that we decided to play with this spring. And it was really great to be able to put in this small amount that we were already kind of planning to play with. And then we had this really cool outlet of customers that we had a little bit more communication with, a little bit more direct to consumer relationship of, and those customers had a little bit more appreciation or, you know, seemed excited about it. They were, you know, curious about what we might, you know, be kind of playing with in terms of varieties and new vegetables. Like I mentioned before, you know, something that's really beneficial of the overlap of the farms is that ability to fill in gaps with one another, the complementary produce, you know, everything like that the farmers in particular for vegetables, we can really work together to try and create this consistent supply of a wide variety of vegetables. And then, you know, right now it's still operating. So we're dealing with, you know, it's significantly smaller. There's less produce for sure. However, it seems like we're still getting orders. People are still really excited about it. You know, I think this winter in particular with a spike in COVID, it's been really helpful for people to know that they can kind of fall back on this. We had this wide range of numbers throughout the season. You know, as farm stands and CSAs and everything like that started to open up in the summer, there definitely was a little bit of a change in when and how many orders we were seeing. But it did really feel worthwhile from week to week, despite that. And, you know, I think that that's just a testament to the awesome amount of farms and local produce and products available in our area. And then, you know, like I mentioned before, I also feel like it's a really cool, it's a different way of relating to consumers than wholesale. It's a really different way of understanding how and what people might be interested in buying and in ordering for themselves. You know, over on the bottom or over on the right, we have some cipollini, which we're going to grow more of this year, just because it seemed like people were really excited about some new different onion options, that kind of stuff. So that's been a really cool part of this for us. Additionally, at Riverland Farm, we have had to make some adjustments, as everybody has. And, you know, part of that, I mentioned we do a winter share in November through January. And this year, one of the big things that we've done is offering curbside pickup as well for our winter share. So we usually have crates, as you see in that top left picture, of roots and various, you know, high tunnel grown lettuce and herbs and spinach available for pickup. And so a lot of people are still coming in. We usually have them bagged up anyway for the winter share, but when usually people come in, they pick up their share, they, you know, take it all out on their own. They use their reusable bags. This year we are offering that curbside pickup where we actually pack a box for someone. They call a number, they call our cell phone, whoever's staffing the share, when they get there, and we bring it out to their car for them. We view about 25% of our customers this winter are using this. They seem really grateful for this option. It also seems like it's really helped mitigate, you know, kind of traffic jams in our small winter share space, which I think has helped with the safety and comfort of ourselves as well as the members. We also, as we can see, this year was the first year we branded our rubber bands. It was an adjustment that we were making prior to COVID, but it was something that has really helped with the collaborative for us. It's felt like it's a really cool way to be able to say, for people to have a name attached to that bunch of beets that they're getting in their share or in their customized box. Just a kind of reminder that we're here and appreciate their support. And then as we all experienced, there was a lot of new safety precautions that we were using on the farm all year. We were using masks, obviously, in a wide variety of situations. We had to adjust how many trucks and vehicles we were using on a day-to-day basis because we were trying to limit the amount of people in vehicles. We conveniently had some things in this bottom left picture. You can just see the hand washing station, the portable hand washing station we have strapped to a truck. We had some of those things in place already because we are a GAP certified farm. And so in order for those purposes, we had all of these safety precautions already in place. Hand washing, food or surface sanitizing is built into our operations. So that was actually a convenient component of the shift to COVID safety awareness. But the masks definitely was a big part. We also, we're working around education, particularly in the beginning, around how we should all be kind of operating in our external lives and how much that would impact our individual crew, what each of us does in our outside lives, which is definitely an interesting component of human management. So the future of Riverland Farm, as with every single year, is, it is up to the world. We are looking towards growing an increased amount of certain crops. We're planning on a very similar demand this year as we dealt with 2020. It doesn't seem like the pandemic is changing drastically right now. So we are kind of planning on another year of people hopefully really focusing on local organic agriculture. And we're also working to keep the word out there because we believe that it's really awesome that the support has been there for this local organic agriculture, both through the collaborative and specifically at Riverland Farm. We've felt really supported, and we're hoping that is something that sticks and is something that we are able to count on for the future. As we all are experiencing, climate is changing, and so we are unsure what the future holds in terms of weather. So trying to make some infrastructural investments as well as plans for what to do when we do deal with a summer drought regularly, a really cold and then a really hot spring, a really wet fall. What are our contingency plans? And so that's part of our planning process at this point. And also just trying to plug along and rely on one another and rely on the farms and producers around us, and hope that we have continued support from local people. We also have a lot of support from local organizations such as CISA and NOFA. We're operating full steam ahead in the middle of the summer, and those organizations are constantly thinking about us, and it's amazing to be supported by such organizations. That is it. If there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer any questions. This is our information. Please feel free to get in touch if you have any questions in the future or have any thoughts, suggestions.
Thank you, Emily. We do have a few questions in the chat.
Yeah.
So I can go ahead and read those off if that's easiest, or did you want to read the chat yourself?
No, go ahead. That's fine.
Okay. Elizabeth is asking, does Whole Foods pay fair prices? And do you get to negotiate with them, or did they just tell you this is what we're willing to pay for this crop?
We've had a kind of a wide range of experience. It's actually very store-based. funnily enough, it is this larger corporation, obviously, and we do end up dealing with the headquarters in some portion of any given year. I think that what I've found is the most helpful thing is to be in touch with them on a regular basis, to be sure that they're aware that we're still here. And, they have a certain amount of money that's allocated towards local and regional foods, and specifically organic. And so they are kind of supposed to bring in local organic foods. So that's helpful on our end. We don't necessarily negotiate price. I do think that they expect that we will have a slightly higher price than, the distribution center. There are times where they've approached us asking us to lower prices, and we've had to kind of hold a hard line around that. Kind of trying to reiterate the idea of promoting and supporting local agriculture. So yeah, we don't have much of a negotiating spot, but they are helpful. There's resources there. They have a lot of requirements. That's kind of the bigger part about Whole Foods.
I've heard that. A couple more questions. How does Sunderland Farms decide what the individual farms receive for crops?
What we sell, maybe, is that?
Elizabeth, do you want to clarify?
Sure. Actually, I think you gave the answer. You said that farms set the price that they need, and then the co-op adds 20%.
Yeah.
So I asked the question before you got to it. So thank you.
And then you have a couple more questions there, Elizabeth. Do you want to take it from here?
Well, I'm just curious about pricing and how things work out. So with the co-op, how do you set the quality of the things that you sell? Have you ever had a problem where one of the farms sent in a crop that other people would have been embarrassed by?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about this is it feels in some capacity, having shifted throughout this year, having shifted more towards the kind of just producer side of it. Caroline at Kitchen Garden is really a lot more on the kind of operator side of it and dealing with a lot more of the customer communications. But what we've kind of dealt with throughout the year, and what her and I have even dealt with, we sold watermelons to them, and there were a couple times where they ended up with broken watermelons, either at their spot, or someone had one in a box. And so there is this kind of back and forth between the collaborative staff and communications from them and the producers. There's kind of two sides of it. I think one side is that idea that a farmer or a producer has to decide what their quality standard is, and that ultimately, if they send something that maybe I wouldn't necessarily consider the highest quality, it does kind of translate in some respects to them and not necessarily the collaborative. That said, there's also that overarching understanding of quality, and trying to make sure that what people are getting is what they're paying for. And so there have been, various cases where those negotiations in some capacity are done, where there's communications around it of maybe this price should drop down because these are a little bit smaller than, is this the size that you're looking at for the rest of this crop? Maybe we should drop the price down a little bit so that people have a little bit more of a fair relationship to the price to what they're getting. But generally, I think that Caroline in particular has done a really good job of balancing that, the compensation towards the customer of oh, sorry, we messed up, as the collaborative, and then talking with the producer about hey, we received 5 cracked watermelons. One of them was in the box. We're going to compensate that one, but maybe the other 4 can be, taken off of your guys's. And so there's just communications around it. And it definitely, it's a really hefty job that Caroline and that whole staff does. There's a lot of communications that happen on a daily basis. And so it definitely, I think it was really helpful for them to hire a full staff for it. I think it made a big difference.
Thank you.
Yeah.
A few more questions. I'll try to stop by quarter of for Steve. Whitney, do you want me to read your question or would you like to ask it?
I can ask it.
Okay.
I have a small farm, so I'm really intrigued by what you're doing in like the store. But the fact is, we have a CSA, and then we have all these other things. So I have tried to figure out which ones, like a farm stand versus an online store, because if you have the farm stand, then you have people come to it. Do you find that you spend more time like packing the like individual boxes versus being out on the farm, or do you just have more people doing these jobs?
What ended up happening was that it did start in the first month, I'd say we were staffing everything with our farm staff. That our 3 farms were staffing it basically. That said, it was March, April, or it was April. So we were kind of, we had a little bit extra leeway here and there with staff. As we kind of honed in on May, and we were all kind of like looking at that ramp up, we really decided that Kitchen Garden was going to hire an individual staff for the whole thing. So the box pack, the receiving of everything from the producers, even the communications between the collaborative and the producers, the communications between the collaborative and the customers, that is all managed by its own staff. It just was completely unrealistic for the farms to be doing that themselves. It is big enough that it just takes too much time. Like you said, it takes an afternoon for them to pack, a couple hundred boxes.
Just wondering.
Great, thank you. Anita is asking, what has been your experience hiring and retaining workers during the pandemic?
The retention has been awesome. People want jobs, and so they're sticking around for sure. We are just about to get into our hiring cycle for 2021, and we had job descriptions and posts ready to go in December. But I definitely had a little bit of pause around that this time around, just because I knew I had employees who were finishing work and looking for work for the winter, and they were telling me how dismal the job opportunity situation is. And so I was a little hesitant to not be dealing with an onslaught of people who maybe didn't necessarily understand what we were actually looking for, and that the start date wouldn't actually be until April or May. And so we're delaying our hiring process a little bit this year just for that reason. Also, I don't necessarily feel like I want to inundate the job listing process with our listings for people who are looking for jobs right now. I think that I want to make sure that they're able to see what they need to see for right now. But I do feel like, offering benefits and, paid leave for COVID purposes and everything like that has been a really big part of trying to retain employees through this, and trying to support them through whatever's going on at their house and their world. That's been it's a totally additional thing that obviously is really important for employee retention. But I also think that, COVID just added an extra level of extreme stress to everybody's life. And so definitely having a lot of compassion for what everybody is going through, I think was a really big part of employer retention this year.
Great. Bruce asks, for intact seconds grade produce, do you work with a food rescue organization?
In regards to seconds produce, there's been a couple of things that we've done. We have some farms in the area and some people who've actually offered to do some gleaning. And so sometimes it'll work out well where we can call those people and they will come in and glean. We also often operate we donate a lot to the food bank and the survival center in our area. And so anything that comes through the washroom that is not necessarily considered wholesale quality, that ends up on the side and that gets donated, and it also is eaten by the crew because it's usually a totally fine vegetable. It just isn't pretty. So we definitely have a process for seconds. I think that it's something that we could really improve on. I think that it's one of the things that is hard about wholesale is that the quality is such a distinct level. And so, you know, in trying to arrive at that quality standard, we do end up with more seconds than I would maybe want. And so some of it gets left in the field, gets, you know, tilled back in as nutrients for the following crops, which is great. And some of it does, a lot of it does get donated. The food bank has also, the Food Bank of Western Mass applied for a grant this year, and they've been actually, with a couple of us farms, they've been actually able to pay for some of the donations as part of a COVID relief. And that's been a really interesting process around, you know, we have all of these seconds that we're going to donate to them anyway, but they have some grant money where they can actually pay us for them, which has been awesome.
Yeah. Laura would like to know, how many people does the collaborative have to pack all of your boxes?
I think that they are employing up to, I think that there's maybe 6 or 7 on the pack line. And then they have a manager, and I think that they kind of rotate some people in and out of the harvest crew to help with that in necessary moments. But it does seem like, I think that maybe I would say 10 people probably maximum for the whole kind of collaborative operation.
And one more question, does the cooperative have a conflict resolution process?
That's a great question. We have not written out a conflict resolution process. We have employed one person in our area to kind of help moderate some of the meetings when we were talking about some of the more difficult things. Something that has kind of helped with that is that a lot of the actual financial and business decisions have actually shifted to Kitchen Garden, just because it is a DBA for them. And so there's a lot more, you know, us as founders have started to occupy a little bit more of a consulting and advisory position, and a little bit less of the like actual decision making, which helps with conflict. But yeah, so I think, you know, we haven't necessarily written anything out specifically. Most of the staff, well, all of the staff in the collaborative group operates under the Kitchen Garden staff, so they have their own crew policies that they're operating with.
Great. Thank you so much. We're going to shift over to Steve, and we'll come back if there's time for more questions.
Great.
Emily, that was amazing. Thank you. So great to hear about that and all that you're doing. I'm going to pull up my slides here. All right. Hopefully that's coming up for you all here. So my name's Steve Munoz. I'm the farm manager at Massaro Community Farm in Woodbridge, Connecticut. We're located just outside of New Haven. And I want to give a quick overview of what's happening at the farm, and then get into how we've made some changes this year. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit. Our mission is keep farming, feed people, build community. Our first year of production was in 2010. So, you know, and I was hired just before that to help get the operation up and running. And the idea was to reclaim and restore this 57-acre property. The Massaro family had been here previously, and it was a small dairy farm. And as small dairy went kind of out of business in the area, they stopped farming. The cows were sold off, and very little had been happening here in the previous 20 years or so before 2010. But people in the community wanted to see it get up and running. As an operation, the farm was put into a conservation easement with the town of Woodbridge, and people in the community formed a local nonprofit and was able to lease the land from the town. So we had a 20-year lease and some initial funding, which helped us get up and running. So we started on 4 acres, had a pioneer CSA with 125 subscribers, and bit by bit we reclaimed land, and now, you know, we're growing on over 10 acres. As of 2019, we had about 240 CSA subscribers. we were going to 2 to 3 farmers markets and selling to restaurants in the New Haven area. We are certified organic. We're committed to donating at least 10% of the produce we grow to local hunger relief organizations. And then we also offer on-farm educational programs and events throughout the year. So here's a look at our property. So most of the 57 acres is woods and wetlands, and you can see the fields make up 10 to 15 acres. There's just over 10 that we've reclaimed and that we're growing on, and there's another 4 to 5 that we are in the process of still reclaiming and hope to be producing on in the next couple of years. And so here's another look at our fields. And you can see we have, this picture is actually still a little bit old. You can see a couple of the tunnels that are set. They're movable tunnels that we move back and forth. We no longer move those. Those are now longer tunnels, and we have six high tunnels, and they're full of produce that will grow throughout the winter and distribute throughout the winter months. Typical programming here. Celebrate spring in mid-May. It's a start of the season organic seedling sale. We have a maypole, we have music and workshops and family fun activities, workshops like how to have backyard chickens or pickling, or how to take care of your shrubs, or organic land care type workshops. We do an annual dinner on a farm on Labor Day weekend. We set up dinner for 150 to 180 people out in the field. It's one of our larger fundraising events to help support our programs and donations. We do a fall harvest festival in mid-October, and then throughout the year we have workshops for adults and programming for youth, and a summer camp for youth as well. And then we do lots of partnering with partners in the community off the farm as well. Every Earth Day, we have a big rock to rock bike ride across New Haven, which is a big event for us as well. So all of that really had to change in 2020, of course. And in some ways that the farm just goes on, the vetch comes up through the peas and oats as it is here in this picture, and there's work to be done. So, we felt we're in pretty good position because we're a direct to consumer farm. As soon as there was a shutdown, we opened up an online store, and the winter months are really not crucial for us in terms of sales. We're usually trying to get our CSA sales in so that we don't have to do as much marketing in April and May. But from January to May, we're doing occasional restaurant sales. Our tunnels are full of produce, but there's not an urgency to harvest them. They're kind of hibernating there to harvest as we like. And there's just a handful of restaurants we typically work with, and I'm in weekly communication with them, and we harvest as needed throughout the winter. But given that restaurants were shutting down indefinitely in mid-March, we sort of quickly pivoted, but more to help our other vendors, our other farm friends and such, who had relied on selling to restaurants, who relied on going to market, who relied on selling to schools or institutions, and suddenly are sitting on product and had nowhere to sell it. So we wanted to create this way, a safe way for people in the community to purchase produce, and offer an opportunity for other vendors who might not have that kind of direct to customer relationship. So, we did lose our restaurant outlets, but this was initially, and still now is really more about helping our farm friends. The benefit for our staff was that suddenly we had more work to do. So opening a weekly store meant that, every Friday we had to pack and, receive and pack orders for everyone who had placed an order during the week. But we also wanted to be very careful with our staff. So this was going to be number one for us, was staff safety. I live here on the farm, as I said, it's a nonprofit and conservation land, but I do live here. I've got 2 small kids, so my own safety, my family safety was important to me, but also anyone coming to the farm, I wanted to make sure that they were safe. So we needed to set up protocols, we had everyone wear gloves. We wore masks. We set up distancing workstations. And we also promised sick pay for anyone who was going to be in here. We said, if you get sick during this time, we'll pay for at least 2 weeks of sick pay, which is not something we had set up previously. And if it's more serious, we'll figure it out after that. Happily, actually, no one got sick during the farm year, and we ended up just paying out sick pay at the end of the year anyway, as kind of a thank you and hazard pay for the year. So for the first week, I wanted to get this going. I didn't know how. We didn't have a store set up initially, so I just put out an email through our constant contact and let the orders come in over email, and set up an Excel spreadsheet. And I used Calendly for scheduling pickup times. So we set up pickup hours, 12:30 to 5:30, and had 30-minute time slots. And so we would let 10 people for each 30-minute slot, so that we weren't overwhelmed with vehicles coming in. And we set up a little drive-through area in front of the barn with cones so that cars could come in. We set up a little tent outside the barn, and set up a distancing station so that people, we'd have their produce labeled. We'd get their name. We'd put it out on the table for them, or put it in the back of their car. And week one we had about 75 orders, and it grew to about 150. And it was very clear in week one that I could not keep doing this with an Excel sheet and taking orders off of email. But I was happy to get it up and running, and the demand was clear, and we needed to make a change. So happily I had someone else who works with me on the farm who had experience with Square, and they set up a Square store, and it was ready for week 2. And from there we were able to work out kinks, which we're still working out for anyone who's been playing with Square. It's not perfect, but it has worked well for us, and we've expanded products. As more people ordered, we needed to expand our hours, starting at 11:30 instead of 12:30, to allow more vehicles to come through. And one of the things we did right away also was, instead of offering our products a la carte, where you could order a bunch of kale or a bunch of arugula or a bunch of radishes, we made it so you had to buy a bundle of produce. So we were setting a price between $15 and $25 and saying that bundle included 1 bunch of kale, 2 bunches of lettuce, a bunch of carrots, a bunch of radishes, and that would change weekly. And that streamlined our packing and ordering. So we had the products that were coming from us, and then from a handful of other vendors. And it was a lot to do for 3 to 5 of us. Ultimately, I did actually, I was able to bring on more staff. Typically in the winter, there's myself and 2 other farm staff working here 2 to 3 days a week as needed, depending on conditions. And other seasonal farm staff who work with us in the summer, they have maybe other winter work at restaurants or teaching or any other winter work. And some of those folks lost some of that work or had reduced hours elsewhere, and they were able to pick up more hours with us. And we needed it, as we were getting 130 to 150 orders per week. And it would take us basically all day on Friday to pack those orders. So we set up our store where it would open on a Sunday morning or Monday morning. We'd put out an email blast with all the products available. We'd receive orders through the store until Wednesday night at 8 p.m. And I'd then send a text to all those vendors with the order list, and we'd get it delivered to us on Thursday or Friday morning. And then we'd start packing orders first thing Friday morning. And having the Calendly set up really helped, so we could just, if we knew who's coming between 11:30 and 12, we pack those orders first and just make our way through the day as people were coming, so that orders were ready. We partnered with Seacoast Mushrooms, 5 Acre Farms for milk, eggs, yogurt, and buttermilk. Another local farmer around here does pork and charcuterie. We did flowers from another farm for a few weeks in the spring before markets were back open. Apples from an orchard, cheese. In the fall, we were able to get some local coffee. And we considered other items like bread and more, but and actually lots of other businesses reached out to us to see if we could include their products in our store. But we really needed to consider our time and storage capacity. We don't have an insulated barn. We have a an uninsulated barn and a couple of coolers and not that much storage space. So, there's only so much that we could bring in, and then I needed to figure out managing my own time for running this store. And also, the farm season was ramping up as well. So suddenly this was, we were at sort of full sprint in late March and early April without even, the other farm work happening. So we ultimately didn't take on too much else beyond these products here. There was maybe a few a few special guests once or twice, and we'll still consider more for the future. But right now, I think we're kind of at capacity with the current products we have here. So, and the other thing, of course, we were seeing is a large surge in CSA interest. I wish this was not pandemic related and that there was always this kind of local interest in the CSA. But every week from late March to the end of April, we were getting, 15 to 25 inquiries or just checks showing up for our CSA. So, most years in the last 4 or 5 years, we'd have 200 to 240 subscribers. By the end of April, we had over 300, and I stopped the sales then and started up a waiting list. And we haven't had a waiting list since maybe 2012 or 2013. So, it's great to see that interest, and of course, I hope it continues, but it's odd that it came in because of this. Or a little unfortunate that it came in because of the pandemic. But we also knew we would need to make changes. So typically our CSA is a market style CSA where people come into our barn and we have our produce laid out in bins and people pack their own CSA. So we have it listed, you come in and you'll see a bin full of potatoes or bagged potatoes, and it'll say take a couple bags of potatoes and then move on down the line and grab your winter squash and then the lettuce and such. And people have a little bit of choice involved with that. But we set up a produce exchange bin where people can, put something in that they don't want, take something else out. We knew we weren't going to be allowing that this year. Our barn doesn't have space for distancing. And we didn't want, I didn't want to make sure we put none of our staff at risk. So I didn't want to have anyone sharing indoor space with us. So we changed from that market style to doing pre-bagged. So our staff bagged up all the CSA and we did the drive-through pickup, requiring everyone who's coming to pick up to be distanced and masked. And we also, part of our CSA is you pick crops like cherry tomatoes, peas, green beans, flowers, herbs, and we decided not to do the U-pick. There was plenty of folks who wanted to see that happen so they could have an opportunity to be outside. But again, I didn't want myself or my staff to be in the position of monitoring people's distance, monitoring people's masks, and monitoring behavior. This is just not something I wanted to be engaged in. And I'd say, for some families in the CSA, the U-pick is a really important part, and others, don't use it at all. So we still grew the crops. We grew the cherry tomatoes and picked them ourselves. We actually cut out the green beans. We grew some flowers and herbs and made those available occasionally throughout the CSA. But yeah, we made that call as it got closer to June to say, we're not going to offer this as an option in the CSA this year. We also eventually decided not to attend markets. This is something we're playing by ear. We typically don't attend a market until late May, and then we'll go from May through Christmas, or late May through Christmas. But there were still a lot of questions at that time, and staff safety, again, is the most important for me on this, and also simplifying and streamlining our operation. We needed more time from the staff on the farm to pack our CSA in bags and do the setup. I thought maybe we would return to the market in the fall. Our CSA is 20 weeks, mid-June to the end of October. I thought maybe we'd return in November for the last, 6 weeks or so of the market, but ultimately we decided not to do that. We also limited restaurant and caterer and event sales. Obviously there was lots less of that available, but the most years I send out a weekly availability list for our crops, I stopped doing it. Some restaurants were coming back online and I responded to any requests from chefs who reached out to me, but I stopped pursuing sales there. Partly it was easy to do that because the additional sales in the online stores made up for that. and we could see that. That's one of the great things about the CSA sales, is that we had a lot of that income in hand already that we might have made at markets or through restaurant sales by increasing 20%. So that made that decision easy. But we've tried to remain flexible and responsive to the partners who've been with us for so long. Oh, my slide is not scrolling to the next one. Hang on a second here. Here we go. Now it's scrolling too fast. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay, so typically we have a core staff of about 5 plus myself working on the farm, and in the summer we often hire 3 to 6 people to do 8 weeks of work from the mid-June to mid-August or the end of August. We needed that as well this year, and hiring staff was something I wasn't sure how we were going to do it. We ended up hiring 7 recent high school grads, and then there were 3 high school interns. And the way we set it up was so that they worked mornings only from 8 until noon. So this was a staggered start from our core staff. And again, for me, this was about safety. I didn't want people coming into our parking area, coming into the barn, getting themselves ready in a small space. So our staff will typically start at 7:30. We had the summer staff start at 8. We happily already had in place some farm tech shade structures, so we could take lunches and breaks outdoors. We spaced picnic tables out, so that people weren't gathered, even while they're eating, since they would need to be masked off or drinking, water. We wanted to have that safe space for lunches and for breaks and such. We wouldn't have anyone gather inside the barn or inside the tunnels. And again, gloves, masks, and distancings. The gloves, for me, that was really a choice about a reminder that you're in this. The masks are there too, but I didn't want people, having to rub their mouth or their face, and the gloves are a good reminder. They're useful anyhow, but for wearing. But so in addition to the hand washing, whenever we were doing harvesting, we had gloves. So for 2021, I'm expecting things to be somewhat similar, for better or worse. I think, the staff and visitor safety is still primary for us. We do hope to have a similar level of CSA and store interest. As of now, our CSA sales are a little bit up from where they would normally be at this time of year. So that's encouraging, but I was sort of hoping there would be even more at this time of year, but not yet anyhow. We did plan for increased winter and spring harvest for this year. So we don't always have all of our tunnels full of produce, but they are now. We've got kale, arugula, radishes, carrots, lettuce, some sprouting broccoli. All of the tunnels are full of produce that we can harvest, sort of staggered throughout the winter. And we'll remain flexible to make changes, as needed. So, I'm assuming we won't be at the markets this year, but we may return to one if possible, if that feels safe and manageable for us. And we'll re-engage with restaurants as they come back on, as they expand the work they're doing. We do want to improve kinks with the Square store, or maybe move to a new platform. We use Tend as a crop planning software, and they have a store sales outlet option on there. And then our website uses WooCommerce, and that's a website plugin. So Square has some things that are confusing and sometimes difficult from the customer management side, with some things that we can't seem to be able to control. So we'll look at some new options. I might have skipped this slide earlier, but I should say we made some similar changes last spring with how much we were growing for the winter spring harvest in March. We did a quick transition to our crop plan to plant more things that we would harvest as quickly as possible last April and May, with more radishes, arugula, salad mix type stuff, but also a lot more seedlings. So right away we had requests for seedlings in people's gardens. we typically do a big plant sale at that Celebrate Spring event in mid-May. But we knew we weren't going to be able to offer that pretty quickly, that same event. So we put our seedlings on our store and offered seedlings throughout the spring and tripled our seedling sales. So, you know, home gardening was, you know, one of the big things that came out of the pandemic, or an increase in home gardening, and we were able to supply a lot more seedlings to the community and donated a lot more seedlings to the community, to mutual aid groups and community gardens and such. So here's a look at our 20 by 10 tent outside our barn. You can see some cones and milk crates set up. That was kind of our makeshift drive-through for people to come pick up. The table, you know, these 6-foot folding tables work great as barriers to keep people 6 feet away. You know, lots of people, you know, they're in their mask and they try to come right up to you and talk to you. And I was trying to maintain at all times distance and masks for everyone picking up, so we could place people's produce, their bags, their order on the table, and keep distance, as well as ensure that people are masked up. You know, one of the things that happens in the CSA typically is that when people pick up their produce, we have other items available for sale. So, you know, we'll make flower bouquets, we'll have additional tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, you know, specialty items available for sale at the pickup. This was a little tougher to do this year, but we found ways we'd have, you know, extra of some products available. We were trying to limit, you know, cash and such, and having to conduct sales. So we'd try to make it available in advance, but if not, we were able to set up a little cash box for people to drop money in and grab a bouquet of flowers or grab an extra pint of hot peppers or something. And this was inside our barn. You know, this is typically, we would set it up to look with a little prettier baskets if it were the CSA, but we essentially did the same thing that our CSA members would do. We set up our line of produce, and, you know, it would take us a few hours to get the 300 plus CSA bags bagged up. So that's how we did it there in our barn. And of course, you know, as tough as it was, there's still lots of beautiful moments on the farm. And I think as tough as this year was, I think it was one of the best years for our team. You know, happily I had mostly returning staff, and I think we're all really thrilled to be here on the farm this year. And also happily, I've got most of them coming back too. So that's always been one of the key things to the operation is having really great people and trying to take care of them as best we can.
Great. You've got a question here, Steve. Do you want me to read that out for you?
Sure.
All right. Do you think the mutual aid groups will continue to function, maybe in a modified way, after the pandemic?
I think so. I mean, I think some have shifted a little bit this winter already, and some groups, you know, in New Haven have collaborated or combined, you know, forces, and there's a clear need. So maybe reaching, you know, new populations and reaching people in different ways. So I'd like to think so. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from folks? It looks like there's a follow-up question there. Have you decided to engage in food justice certification, and can you explain why?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know about food justice certification, this is through the Agricultural Justice Project, and for me, this is about the social aspect and the social justice aspect of the organic certification that is, or what I should say is not required as part of the organic certification, part of the, I think, ethics of organics, that just doesn't include the human aspect of it, of taking care of the people on the farm, making sure they're paid a fair wage, making sure they have that they're treated well, and have rights. I think maybe that tends to be less of an issue on small farms like ours. Bigger farms, I think, have an issue with that. But for us, I think it's really about communicating to the public that people are being paid a fair wage, that they, that we're looking out for their safety, and have things in place to ensure it. So we are going to pursue that this year. Unfortunately, I've said it in years past, and then things like the pandemic come up and I take it off my plate. So I was committed to doing it last year and said, we're doing this. And then suddenly I'm creating an online store and adapting all of our plans, both, in my family life and on the farm, and, got put aside till this year. But it is our intention to become certified this year.
Elizabeth just had a follow-up comment. The Agricultural Justice Project is trying to raise enough money to make food justice certification free for the farms.
Yeah, so I think one of the concerns for growers is always, what is this going to cost? What's the dollar cost, and then what is the time cost? So for anyone who's done organic certification, it takes time to do the paperwork, and there's a cost to getting certified. And when I looked into the food justice certification, well, of course, that was one of my questions. Well, what is this going to take in terms of my time for paperwork, or creating employee manuals part of this? How is that going to? What kind of time is that going to take? And then what's going to be the annual cost? And the Agricultural Justice Project is addressing the cost side by raising money to make it free, sort of to cover the cost. So just as an organic certifying agency would do, someone's going to come and do an audit. A third party is going to come and do an audit of our farm, and there's cost to that. But the AJP is trying to cover that through raising funds.
This is Laura, and thank you, Emily and Steve. Have you, how many employees do you have actually working the Square ordering administrative process of uploading pictures or items to that shopping list?
It's a mix of 2 people, so partly myself and partly one other staff.
I really love WooCommerce, but I do find I spent an awful lot of time uploading products to the online store myself, because I'm doing it all myself. But I'm just wondering, for both Emily and Steve, what to continue these processes, is there going to be sort of an expectation that they'll continue in perpetuity, or is there sort of a level of sales that they're going to, once they get to a certain point, are they going to drop the whole thing? Just a thought about the future.
Yeah, for us, part of it has been, our partners. So for example, our mushroom partner here, in the summer, the sales dropped quite a bit. So we were getting 130 to 150 orders per week throughout the spring. And then by midsummer, I think there were a lot of changes in the marketplace. People were going out to stores and markets a bit more, and we were dropping to 30 to 50, by probably the end of July or early August, we were down to 30 to 50 orders per week. And it just wasn't enough to make it worthwhile for the mushroom vendor to kind of work us in to their route. And then that was fine. We understood that. And we brought them back in this fall as things started to change again. So part of it's on a vendor to vendor basis. And likewise for us, for this winter, we've decided at the moment to do it every other week. So we've been doing it every week since mid or late March. And then we took a week off for Thanksgiving, 2 weeks off at Christmas and New Year's. And right now we've said we're going to do every other week through the winter months. And if there's a big surge in interest, maybe we'll move to every week. But the hope is that these products, including our own produce, they have 2 weeks shelf life. So the hope is we can lessen our sort of admin load by doing it every other week.
And your two admin people that are uploading to Square are doing that for the mushroom and the meat people.
Yes, yeah. So we'll have them, email it to me, and then I'll send it over to someone else to do, or I'll do it. But happily, most of it is static, so I haven't been changing, the pictures. A lot of these products are the same. The milk and egg image, the pork and the mushroom, their images aren't changing. So, and likewise, even for our produce bundle, we've kind of kept the same image, and unless we're doing a totally unique product, where I'm not changing the images.
I switched all my share purchases over to WooCommerce this year, which has been a godsend.
One of the things that I've liked about Square particularly is the app functionality. So I can look on my phone. I don't know if WooCommerce is doing that. That's been one of my hesitancies to change, but I'm communicating with the partners on my phone while I'm out in the field. And if they want an update, the mushrooms, they're packing their orders by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, and our store doesn't close till 8, but I can look very quickly on my phone through the Square Store app and see how many orders have come in. I know what the typical ordering trends are, so I can give, an order from my phone. So that's one of the features that I've really liked about Square is the app on the phone makes it very easy to see what's happening in real time and then communicate with our partners.
Great.
Something that we've been wanting, or I've been wanting from Local Food Marketplace, is an app for that same reason. They haven't made it, so I just go on the website on my phone when I'm in the field, which is a little clunky, but it is something that I've definitely been wanting, and was kind of thinking to give a little bit of pressure on them around, both just for the collaborative as well as our own, because it's what we do our own wholesale through as well. The nice thing, Laura, you were asking about people updating the admin kind of side of it, and with the collaborative, everybody kind of updates their own. They put their own pictures. Obviously, there is some management around that Caroline's doing. Someone maybe doesn't have, there's some older farmers that we're listing for that I think Caroline does some of the listing for, that just haven't necessarily transitioned to computers at all. But for the most part, everyone's kind of managing their own inventory, which is a really big benefit of that software. That said, the software is extremely expensive. We had a lot of support from CISA, actually had a grant that helped us cover the startup cost for it, which made a huge difference in terms of all of our own financial investment in it.
That's really helpful to know. I didn't want to lose this question from a little ways back. Brucey asked Steve if you could say a bit more about your experience with mutual aid groups.
Yeah, I'll just say, a lot of this comes through just being connected in the community and already working with whether it's shelters or soup kitchens or any kind of hunger relief organizations. And as more of the mutual aid organizations popped up this spring, people were reaching out to us, and I really leave it to them to figure out what's happening. I'll ask a few questions as to what kind of produce or product is appropriate and how much quantity they can take, and then from there a lot of stuff is happening weekly on text. Someone will text me and ask what we've got, or do we have enough, or do we have something they can come pick up, and I'll let them know what we've got. So it's really relationship based and communications via text and occasionally phone calls. It's been very simple, but on our end, I'm trying to just do the farming part and make the produce available, and we already have it built in to be donating at least 10% of our produce. So it might not be 10% per week. It depends. Sometimes it's happening in large volumes, at certain times of year, and lesser amounts at different times of year. But we knew that this was going to be an issue this year. So we made some shifts to our crop plan to make more available. So we did more carrots, more beets, more radishes, some more. We don't do a lot of winter squash. We did a little more winter squash, just things that are a little more shelf stable that'll last, and a little bit fewer greens, so that we'd have more in storage that we could easily donate.
Here's another question for you, Steve. How does your land lease work? How does it interact with your nonprofit? How does it impact the way your land and home are or are not? And is it subject to property taxes?
So our farm is on conservation land, so there's not taxes related to it. It's the property, the 57 acres is owned by the town of Woodbridge, and they lease it to the nonprofit Massaro Community Farm. There's a house here, so I live in the house, and that's part of my job. I'm employed by the nonprofit, not the town. So the town doesn't operate anything here. They lease it to us. We got a 20-year lease in 2009. So it was a 10-year lease with a 10-year renewal. So we're now 11 years into that. We renewed the 10 years. I'd love to see a much longer lease, but the lease, is written out with various provisions, essentially, saying that we can do things that a farm needs to do here. This was a farm previously. It's still a farm now, although we are in, otherwise it's a residential area. There are houses across the street and on either side of the farm from us. Because the town owns it, the town is interested in it. So, we try to stay in communications with, the local board of selectmen, with the first selectman, with the, zoning, we have wetlands on the property. So we, like any other farm, if we want to build something, we've got to talk to the town and get appropriate permits. And also the town is the owner, so we need their permission as well. So we want to keep those relations positive, and we want to keep them in the loop with everything we're doing and planning. But they don't, control what we do or anything. And as said, there's not a tax relationship because it's not a taxable property because it's in a conservation easement.
Looks like one more for you. As a nonprofit with a commitment to donate at least 10% of your produce, have you set up a way to specifically funnel donations to support or maybe increase that effort?
That's a great question. We haven't, and that's been a long time discussion, and I think for lots of nonprofits, you ask for people to just donate to you generally, donate to the area of greatest need, or donate to specific projects. So we, part of our fundraising efforts is, always kind of talks about the work that we do donating produce, but we don't have sort of a specific fund, or even a line in the budget that says, donations for produce, or revenue, or income for produce donations. We know what it costs, because when you donate, this year I think there was almost 9,000 pounds of produce, and I mark it down what that is and what that value would be on the market. I have a sense that okay, we donated $25,000 worth of produce this year, or $30,000 worth of produce this year. That's a real cost, and I remind our board and our that we need to raise money to support that we can't just give that away, but there's not necessarily money specifically supporting that. But our general fundraising helps cover it.
Thank you. Lots of great information from both presenters today. I just wanted to remind folks we still do have Emily. We have just a few minutes left. Does anyone have follow-up questions for either Steve or Emily? Elizabeth is saying the spring issue of The Natural Farmer will be dedicated to resilience in the face of COVID. This workshop should be included. So definitely we'll make sure that the person in charge of the spring issue knows about this presentation and has the video for resource. Great point. Emily, did you have any final comments? No. Okay, great. Well, thank you both so much again. All right, well, thank you so much. And I hope you guys enjoy the last session of the conference.